Heads up, I'm a bit sick today, so I'm gonna sound a little off. When it comes to multiplayer games, there is one word that is constantly thrown around whenever you talk about them: balance. Now, for most people, this may not sound like a big deal, and in single player games, it's really not. It feels great to plow through enemies with absolutely nothing standing in your way. But in a multiplayer game, you're not the only one who's playing. The AI doesn't have feelings, but the other person on the other controller certainly does. And, well, you want them to feel happy, don't you? But you don't want to let them win, so it's important to keep things balanced. By that I mean every weapon is good, every character is good, and nothing is bad. That is a gross oversimplification, I know. But basically, what I'm trying to say is everything is viable and nothing is unviable. In a perfect video game, this would be the case. But as we all know, this is never the case in an actual game. Heck, it's never the case in real life. If you don't get everything just right, something is going to feel wrong. Now, note how I specifically worded the title: multiplayer games, not fighting games. That's because A, I don't want to pigeonhole myself into fighting games. B, I'm not really good at fighting games. And C, most importantly, they're not the only ones affected by balance. Balance is something that affects all multiplayer games. Be it asymmetrical games, fighting games, shooting games, all the stuff. So today, we're going to look at those three: fighting, asymmetrical, and first-person shooters. And what better way to do it than with the three kings of those three things: Dead by Daylight, Smash Bros. Ultimate, and Team Fortress 2. So, pros and cons of making this video before we get started. Con, I have to talk about Dead by Daylight again. But pro, I finally get to talk about Team Fortress 2. So that's going to be a plus. Anyway, let's start with the least egregious of all these examples: Smash Brothers. Smash Brothers Ultimate is actually a very balanced game. Wave 1 of DLC was actually surprisingly balanced for what it was. So, why is it being talked about if it was so balanced? Well, with all these characters and a bunch of new ones coming on the way, it was inevitable that they were going to mess up at some point. And that some point just so happened to be with the introduction of Sephiroth and Steve. Let's start with Sephiroth, as he's much easier to explain. Sephiroth is a very simple character on paper. He's a keep-away guy with the abilities to reflect and parry, meaning as soon as he gets your projectile, he is going to attack twice as hard. He also has extremely fast attacks, some easy counters to certain moves, and worst of all, he's really good at recovery. Now, granted, none of this sounds bad, and if they were all on separate characters, then no, it wouldn't be bad at all. But they're all on the same character. Sephiroth basically does it all. When I first played as him, he instantly clicked with me, and I just knew his power was great. But that doesn't even start to compare to Steve. If you were to tell me that Steve was going to make it into Smash Brothers, and that he was going to be the most powerful character we've seen since Brawl Meta Knight, I would not have believed you. I'm eating my own words now because Steve is the most powerful character we have seen until Smash. Until the next Smash game, which, let's face it, that's probably going to happen. Ultimate Steve is basically just has every tool imaginable. He's not easy to get a hang of, but he does have the ability to block with blocks. And if you know what you're doing, he can actually go through the block's hitboxes because they're not as big as they think. What's even weirder is the fact that Steve can create multiple different tool tiers, and his diamond sword basically just cleans house. He also has two grabs. Two grabs! That is very unnecessary. He's a Swiss Army knife of a Smash Brothers character. That is unnecessary here, people, but whatever. Two grabs it is. He also has plenty of tools that can help him out of certain situations and a decent recovery. And his recovery is considered the worst part of his kit. And it's still better than Little Mac's. So that should tell you something. No disrespect on Lil Mac players. I'm a Lil Mac player and I love him. But seriously, Steve doesn't even have a parry or a reflect, and he's actually twice as strong as Sephiroth. I never would have imagined Steve even coming to Smash Brothers in the first place, let alone him being the most powerful character. But we're actually already done talking about Smash Brothers Ultimate. Yeah, surprisingly, they've kept it clean for the most part. Every character is well balanced. It's just those two that really threw things off. And if I remember correctly, most of Sephiroth's problems were patched out. So it's really just Steve that's a problem. So much so that in some tournaments, Steve is actually banned. So, let's move on to a game that I've been wanting to talk about for a good long while now. Team Fortress 2. Alright, now I get to talk about a game that I've been wanting to talk about on this channel for a good long while. Team Fortress 2. Team Fortress 2 is definitely a game you have heard of. And definitely a game that you may have played. Team Fortress 2 is a game that is so synonymous with gaming culture that it's hard to imagine a time when we didn't even have it. Team Fortress 2 is just so much fun, but there are plenty, and I mean plenty, of videos explaining why it's so fun. I don't normally play first-person shooter games, but this one just felt different. It clicked with me so much because all the characters play so differently. Now, as for overpowered or underpowered things, Team Fortress 2 is unfortunately a poster child of both. You see, everybody's base weapons are fine, often called the stock weapons, and they do exactly what they're supposed to. But then come the unlockable weapons. The unlockable weapons are essentially exactly what they sound like, weapons you need to unlock. But if you do, you could get an unfair advantage. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look. Every single weapon in Team Fortress 2 comes with an upside and a downside. At least all the unlockables do. Starting, for instance, with the Winger for Scout. The Winger grants you some extra firepower, plus a higher double jump in exchange for a grant, in exchange for less ammo. Or if you want something a little more stunning, the candy cane is a strong weapon with the ability to gain you some health packs. In exchange, it makes you a lot more vulnerable to explosives. And I mean a lot more. Now, where on Now as for overpowered weapons, there aren't a whole lot, but what are there are really bad. The Pretty Boy's pocket pistol is a great example for Scout. It deals less damage overall, but every time you hit someone with it, you get healed up, and that is really annoying to deal with. Or, for a more obvious example, engineers. Uh, oh, yeah. Engineers Wrangler. The Wrangler basically means you can take over your sentry. It grants a shield that makes it hard to kill, plus you can aim where exactly it goes, plus it has aim assist, plus you can sentry jump with it, although that last stat is not listed. Now, granted, you're probably assuming there's going to be a downside. What is that downside? You lose access to your pistol, and you have to stand still. That's quite literally it. That's all you lose access to. That's not a fair downside. I feel like something like this should be a little more punishing. Also, but that's not the only one. There are a lot more. And I could go on, but here's a quick highlight. Sniper's Bizarre Bargain allows you to shoot a lot quicker the more headshots you get. Scout's Criticola. It makes you extremely frail, but at the same time, you hit like a semi truck. Pyro's Phlogiston. No air blast, but if you never were able to air blast in the first place, doesn't really matter. The Tomislav, the only good one of these weapons. Basically, all it does is make you rev up faster. But then you got the big two, Medic's Vaccinator and Spy's Diamondback. Imagine for a second. Critical hits in Team Fortress 2 triple the damage you get. Now, if a weapon offers critical hits, that's usually a major requirement. But not here. All you need to do is just backstab someone or sap their sentry, which they were going to do anyway. If you're a good spy, this requirement doesn't even feel like one. The Diamondback just feels like you get everything for free. And then there's the Vaccinator. The Vaccinator is basically just a diet medigun, which allows you to, well, do everything that the medigun does, except you can toggle specifically what you are going to be strong against. Now, what's the matter with this? The Ubercharge. You get it a little too quickly. That doesn't sound like that big of a deal until you realize you can do 4 of these at once. And then suddenly it's a big deal. So as you can see, Valve's Team Fortress 2 has not been in the best shape when it comes to balance. Heck, it hasn't been in the best shape since Jungle Inferno. But, surprisingly, this is not the worst when it comes to balance. No, I saved the worst of the three for last. Dead by Daylight. By far, one of the worst balanced games of all time. Now, granted, it is in a much better spot than it used to be. And all the new stuff has been very well balanced. And dare I say, really fun. I wouldn't still be playing it and talking about it if it wasn't. If it wasn't, I'd drop this game years ago. But, oh man, when it gets something wrong, it gets something so wrong. Dead by Daylight has a lot of notorious balancing issues. In fact, for those of you who play the game, you'll know what I'm talking about. Balance in this game is practically non existent. And there are multiple examples. I could go over a lot, like the old decisive strike, the old borrowed time, the old made for this. Basically, anything older than 2023. I can go over how game breaking it is. But there are three, count them, three characters in specific that are still top tier despite everything they've gone through. Blight, Spirit, and Nurse. Blight, because he can get across the map extremely quickly. Spirit, because she can do the same, except you can't see where she is. And Nurse, because she breaks every rule in the game. And Nurse is going to be the one we're talking about. Because, look at this. No, your eyes do not deceive you. Nurse just went through obstacles that no other killer can get through. And this isn't a glitch. This is her power. And this may surprise a few people because normally stuff like this is reserved for no one, really. Everyone follows a set of rules, and no killer can deviate from them. But the nurse basically is the exception to every rule in the game. She can teleport through anything. Would you believe me if I told you that she has received nothing but nerfs over the years? Except for one shadow buff. But other than that, everything she received was a nerf. She used to be able to get up to 7 blinks, which are teleports, by the way. 7! Instead of the 2 or 3 she can get now. And 3 is the maximum. Before, it was the minimum. But what's even worse is that Nurse just ignores everything that makes a killer balanced. Look, I don't want to talk about this for too long, and I could easily fill up this video with Dead by Daylight stuff. Old decisive strike, able to just make you unable to be hooked, borrowed time, able to just make you invincible, Medal of Man, made for this, object of obsession, Stabiffle. Oh man, I could just go on. This game is really fun. But is it balanced? No. No, it is not. The most balanced it has gotten was with the 2 versus 8 game mode. And even that has issues. So, if you're all wondering why I have changed the way things worked in my sequel, well, sequel ideas, this is why. The game is just so unbalanced. And I get it. Unbalanced fun is really fun. But there's only so much that people can take. So, that is 3 examples of complete and utter imbalance in video games. Please let me know. Are there any things that I missed? Actually, no. I know I missed a lot. This is a gross oversimplification. But I understand one thing. Game balancing is hard. Making sure that every character has an answer to another character whilst juggling all the options and moves that they can make is not something that's very easy. And take into consideration this. All the games that I talked about today have multiple options. Smash Brothers has like 60 something. Team Fortress 2 has more than I can count, and don't even get me started on Dead by Daylight. There's just too much to count with these games. Plus, that's not taking into consideration people who will gladly abuse the overpowered stuff to make someone's day miserable. Looking at you in specific Dead by Daylight players, you know what you did. But, well, all I can say is some of these games are just. I don't think any of these games are going to get that much better because Ultimate and Team Fortress 2 are no longer getting updated, and Dead by Daylight is owned by Behavior, who don't seem to fully understand what it means to balance something. So I'll leave you with this. If you were to fix any of these characters, how exactly would you fix them? And please let me know how you would fix the nurse because, oh my goodness, something needs to be done about her. Give her a full rework. Don't make her unviable, but don't make her like this anymore. This is just too much. Anyway, I've been the Gamer Nerd, and once again, I am sorry I sound super stuffy. I have COVID. So, with that in mind, I bid you farewell.